welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 96 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 22 of A Clash of Kings, that's Catelyn 2.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter, we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We will summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they've got some additional information that will help you in particular if you're not reading along with us. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm okay. How about you?
I'm good, I think. Nothing to complain about.
That's good. I saw because it was on the radio. So I didn't see anything. I heard an interesting question asked on the radio this morning, and I thought I'd run it by you to see what you think. So the question was, if you could go back in time to your 18-year-old self and only say 3 words, what 3 words would that be? I can tell you mine while you think about it.
Well, go on then.
All right. Well, so... depends on how you define a word. Now I'm talking like we're playing what's the game? Codenames. What is a word? What exactly is a single word? But I thought I'd heard this. I think I saw it on a tweet months ago, but I heard it again this morning, and I thought I'd run it by you. I think I would go with something like Bitcoin 2010. But
yes.
if I could make 2010 one word, like 2010 one word, then I would say Bitcoin 2010 2020 or 2021. You know, something.
Oh, because you need to know when to sell it too.
Yes, because I buy it for a penny a piece. I buy $5,000 for a penny a piece. It gets to $10. I'm like, woohoo! I'm selling out.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I have to say, my thoughts also went to the same thing. I thought about Leicester champions.
Oh, yeah,
2016 or something like that, because they were 5,000 to 1, I think.
Yes, so that would be good odds too.
Mm-hmm. I'd have to wait till I was like 46 to place the bet, but you know.
Right.
But actually, honestly though, I would just say, keep on going, because I have led a charmed life and I have no complaints.
Yes, that's true. That you advise too much, you might mess things up.
Exactly. It's the whole Macbeth thing.
Right.
Would Macbeth have murdered his king had he not been told he was going to become king?
Yes, that is the
I
thing.
tell my 18-year-old self to bet on Leicester. It might break them. They might not win the Premier League.
Something
it's the butterfly effect.
Butterfly effect leads to them. Yeah. You could do the same thing with the Bitcoin, I guess. Like if I invested $5,000 in Bitcoin at a penny a piece, it might have thrown the whole thing out of whack, you know? So
Absolutely.
But if it didn't, I'd just have to wait about 10 years, and then I could cash in my riches.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'd tell myself.
Well, we have a super long chapter today, don't we?
Yes.
So we should really crack on. Plus, we're not very interesting.
No. We do this mainly for ourselves, make ourselves laugh, which we do plenty before and after we start recording. So it's really not necessary to do it right now.
That is true. All right, let's get down to business. How did we leave Cat? It has been a while since we've seen Cat. You notice we're on like Tyrion 5, but this is only Cat 2.
Right.
So
yeah.
she has been. We last saw her in her family home of Riverlands. She was debating the wisdom of sending Theon to Pike to recruit Balon Greyjoy, his father, to Robb's side. Since then, her concerns appear to have been vindicated on that score.
Right.
Balon was not very receptive. She was approving the peace terms to be sent south with Cleos Frey, but not expecting them to be successful. She was willing to trade Jaime for the girls, something Robb definitely ruled out. She was concerned that Robb might do something rash out of frustration at the apparent impasse of the war, and she was hatching a plan with her uncle Brynden to form an alliance with Renly Baratheon. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary?
Okay. Cat awakes from a dream of her family reunited, to stiff bones and a sparse tent. She and crew are headed south to discuss an alliance with Renly Baratheon, King Renly Baratheon, that is. She's ready for a good cry, but girds her loins and dresses. her damaged hand more stiff than usual. Outside, she declined Sir Wendell Manderly's offer of quail for breakfast, preferring porridge, nettle tea, and an increased speed of the meal.
She thinks back on how Robb deftly manoeuvred her into accepting this mission, while she felt that her place was with her father in his dying days, with her son Robb to offer her counsel, or back home in Winterfell with her other sons. Robb suggested sending the Great John. She immediately accepted the charge, knowing that the Great John would be a terrible choice for a diplomatic mission.
Sure would.
She smiles wanly at the memory. She now fears that Robb might march into battle, which she thinks is Tywin's hope. But Robb has layers of schemes going that she doesn't know about.
She feels that fate is driving her south, but she yearns to go north. She wrote to Bran and Rickon before she left, but her heart's heavy. Sir Wendell predicts they'll meet the upper Mander River this day, close to where it crosses the Roseroad between King's Landing and Highgarden at a place called Bitterbridge. She's first on her horse. She wants this done quickly, although she's not sure what she'll say to Renly. His claim is so weak, and she hasn't seen him since he was a child. Not exactly old friends.
Renly's outriders spot them early, and a force is sent out to meet them. The welcoming committee is headed by Sir Colin of Greenpools. Every conversation is peppered, pretty much from this point forward, with diplomatic jousting.
Yeah.
Cat's an envoy from the king in the north to see the king in the south. Oh, no, you didn't. He's the crowned and anointed king of all the 7 kingdoms. And that happens a few more times. Sir Colin escorts them to Renly. They reach the outer fringes while still an hour from the river. Renly's host is bigger than Cat imagined.
There's lots of listing of banners, but basically it's everyone, or at least almost everyone, from south of the Riverlands. As they get near the center, they hear cheering. A huge area has been cleared for a melee. Hundreds are in attendance. This grand melee is coming to an end by the time Cat gets there, and only a handful are left standing. Handful of contestants, that is. It comes down to the final 2, Sir Loras Tyrell and a big fella in blue armor. It's close, but the unknown wins in the end to the disappointment of king and crowd. Cat asks Sir Colin who the man is and why don't the people seem to like him. Because he's not a man. Her name is, depending on whether you're Roy de Treese or the rest of the world, Brienne of Tarth. According to Renly, she's everything her father promised that she was.
King Renly offers her anything within his power to grant as a prize for her victory. She requests membership in his King's Guard, known as the Rainbow Guard for their rainbow capes and rainbow spectrum armour. The king grants her this request. Cat feels both shock and pity at the sight of the tall, powerful woman, wondering if there's anything more unfortunate in the world than an ugly woman. Cat's ruminations on Brienne are cut short when Sir Colin announces her to King Renly.
After the initial surprise, Renly expresses his condolences and promises Cersei's head will be sent to her when he takes King's Landing. There's more Lord versus Grace debate regarding Renly and Robb, but it's quickly put aside. Renly offers Cat his pavilion, as he's using the castle as his home while they're here. After a quick tour around Renly's absurdly opulent pavilion, Cat joins the king and the other highborn on the dais of a spirited feast. The boasting of the untested young men make her about as sick as the overabundance of rich food does.
Cat and Brienne begin to debate the effects of winter on nights of summer, when Renly interrupts and asks Cat to walk with him. After questioning the whereabouts of Sir Barristan Selmy, she doesn't know, he takes her to the highest tower of the castle and shows her the full extent of his host. Campfires covered the earth like stars in a night sky. Renly explains it's not his complete host. He names several more smaller hosts that make up his full powers, including his brother Stannis, who commands the fleet at Dragonstone. Cat takes the opportunity to point out that Renly seems to have forgotten that Stannis is his older brother, and therefore has the only claim to the throne. Renly counters that his enormous following is all the claim he needs. He offers that Robb can keep his lands and titles, including that of king, as long as he bends the knee to Renly as his overlord. Before the talks can progress any further, a man rides up on horseback shouting for the king. It seems Storm's End is besieged, not by the Lannisters, but by his brother Stannis.
Uh-oh. Wow, this chapter has so much going on. It's actually quite a fun chapter. I was kind of excited when I realized what chapter we were reading this week.
It only takes a couple of Bran chapters to really make you long for a bit of political intrigue.
Yes, or anything.
Yeah.
Paint drying. No.
Yeah, so it's a hefty chapter for sure. And I don't know, it's been a long time since we've done outtakes, but our summary of that chapter was an absolute debacle.
It was. We've almost used up our whole time just to get through that summary.
We're going into overtime, people.
Due to the magic of editing, our listeners will be spared all of our flubs and mistakes and retakes.
So straight on the heels of Bran dreaming about the Reed siblings and the direwolves and falling again, this chapter launches into a cat dream. She's dreaming about seeing all of her family again.
Right.
And the dream is painfully sweet, family all around her. And waking up from that to the hard reality is not easy. But she's not a northerner by birth, but by marriage, and so she grits her teeth and gets on with life.
Yep. You know, when I read this, it made me think back to when Ned and the kids found the mom direwolf that was the mother of their current direwolf pups, with the stag's antlers stuck in her neck. Ever since King Robert rode north, the family as a unit has been fairly well decimated.
Yes. Sorry, I paused for a second because I thought you meant King Robb Stark, but you meant King Robert Baratheon.
Yes.
Yes.
Did I say Rob, not Robert?
No, you said Robert, but because you were talking about the Starks, I just thought you were... Because his name is Robert, I think, isn't it?
I assume his full name is Robert. Sure. Yeah, likely.
So, and then I was going to say, wrong, incorrect, sir. He marched south. But you were right, it was... he did march north.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, since he rode to Winterfell, since King Robert rode to Winterfell, Ned's dead, Bran's become a paraplegic, Sansa's hostage, beaten, mentally tortured on the regular, Arya's lost and in constant peril, and Rickon is literally being raised by wolves.
Uh-huh.
So
and to be honest, not very conscientious wolves.
No, they're not. They're doing a terrible job.
You're right. I think Summer could bring him to heel, but Shaggy Dog's a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Kat herself. I mean, she's been in danger and hard living for 6 months now since all that happened.
Not to mention the terrible cuts on her hands, scarring. I guess Jon has been doing his thing at the Wall, but he's not exactly had an easy go of it either.
No, yes, he's following through on a plan, but it's not a very nice plan, and it certainly adds to the scattering of the family.
Yes.
So she's being accompanied by a fairly sizable entourage. There's a couple. I think there's about 20 household guards, 2 of whom are named Shad and Hal Mullen. I assume they're all named, but 2 are named to us.
Right. Yes. That guy's just called that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wendell.
The funny thing about Hal Mullen is that once again he states the obvious. He's called out for stating the obvious. Back in the Whispering Wood, it was mentioned that he has a penchant for stating the obvious. And here again, when they realize it's a tourney, he says aloud, "It's a tourney." And then he has a tendency to do this.
That's good. I'd forgotten that, so thanks for that reminder. So Wendell Manderly, who we mentioned, he's the second son of Wyman Manderly, who's currently in Winterfell with Bran.
Right.
He danced with... Beth Cassell.
Beth Cassell, yeah.
Yes.
The older one, Willis, is in Harrenhal, a captive prisoner of Tywin Lannister.
Yes. So Wendell, like his father, is pretty big boned, and that's one of the reasons he was asking for the extra quail to just season his porridge and nettle tea.
Yeah. He seemed pretty disappointed when Kat said, "Nope, we're just gonna have porridge and nettle tea."
Yeah. Sir Perwyn Frey. It's great that the Freys are just on both sides of this battle. I mean, like, whenever you hear a Frey name, you're like, I don't know which side of the battle this is.
You can't possibly
could be either. Yeah. Sir Perwyn, as you'll remember, is the 15th son of Walder. Not particularly prestigious to send the 15th son to visit with the king, but There are just so many Freys, and frankly, so many kings.
Right, yeah. There's almost as many kings as there are Freys, so,
Right.
there's only so many to go around.
Lucas Blackwood, second son of Titus Blackwood, the Blackwoods are a major house of the Riverlands. Robin Flint, second son of Laessa Flint of Widow's Watch in the north, who got a mention in the recent Bran chapters. I think she's pregnant, and so she couldn't travel. Or actually, there was disease in Widow's Watch, and that's why she didn't want to travel. Both those things, yeah. So the party is about 26 in total, which they reckon is large enough to deter casual intervention from warring parties, but not so large as to draw attention. I question that. I think 26 would draw my attention. I think about 12 is probably the optimum number to, let's not mess with them, but they're not worth coming out of our castle to bother.
I can see that.
26 is a bit too many.
Yeah, I follow you.
So, actually, what I was going to talk about now, if you don't mind, is just geographically. I wondered how close Cat came to Arya.
Yeah.
Because they have passed each other. But how close did they come? It definitely seems like that we haven't heard about Cat's journey, but she definitely did not come down the King's Road. That would have been very treacherous.
Yes, it would have, yeah.
Basically, right through the middle of Tywin's forces. She seems to have, like Arya, come down the west side of the God's Eye. So possibly fairly close at some point. I have seen some speculative route maps of her journey, and they have her considerably further west, like not close to the God's Eye at all. So it's possible that was what happened. It does mention in the story that she crossed the Blackwater, and if you cross the Blackwater, then there's only so far you can go west because it springs up quite far east compared to some of the other rivers.
Yes.
So she can't have been too far west.
Yeah, she mentions seeing smoke in the eastern sky, and that's probably a lot of the burning around the God's Eye, which is right where Arya is. So it's possible she was at least in visible range of the smoke of that burning. Yeah. We don't know how far east, or how far west, rather, the burning extends, but we do know there's a lot of burning where Arya was. And I figure they could only have gone about as far west as Stony Sept, because that's where the headwaters of the Blackwater are. So
right, exactly.
That's about as far as they could have gone, because it specifically mentions them crossing the Blackwater. So
yeah, she of course couldn't be completely sure where she would find Renly. I mean, everyone's intelligence says they're heading down the roads from High Garden towards King's Landing. Right. But that's a long road, and you could miss him by a couple of 100 miles quite easily on that road.
Good news is, with the size of their host and the size of Renly's host, you could just ride up and down the Roseroad till you find it. You know?
Right, and actually, given the size of it now she knows the size of it. If you arrive somewhere and it doesn't look like 100,000 people just walked through, they haven't arrived yet.
Right. Just sit there and wait for them. They'll be there eventually.
It's not like you'd hit the road and go, which way should I turn?
Right.
Like, either there's the detritus of 100,000 people and then you head east, or there isn't and you head west.
I like that plan. I think it makes sense.
So Kat thinks back to how Robb sort of outsmarted her in getting her to agree to go on this mission. He threatens to send the great John Umber in her stead to treat with... It's not that smart, because it's practically a joke.
It is. I mean, she should have just looked at him sideways to be like, come on now, don't be silly.
I mean, if she'd called his bluff, he would have been like, okay, well, let me try something else then. Let me try another tack.
Right.
Let me order you to go. Because he definitely wasn't going to do that. That would have been absolutely crazy.
Although I think Umber would have enjoyed jumping into the middle of that melee.
Oh, yeah, probably.
He was like, oh, I'm in. Tag me in.
But I do think, actually, though, if you'd sent him, you would have guaranteed an alliance, but unfortunately, between Renly and Cersei.
Right. He would have driven the brothers back together. Yeah. I was thinking about better options than Cat, and there's not a great deal of options at the moment. I mean, anyone would have been better than the great John Umber, but, he's not got a lot of, like he mentioned, he explains why. Cat says, I don't want to do this, and he says, I don't have any choice. He mentions that, her father, Hoster, is too sick. Her brother, Edmure, he needs there to hold Riverrun. He mentions that Brynden, her uncle Brynden, he needs, because he's his eyes and ears. He's basically his spy out in the world, out in the Riverlands. And so there's really no one left but her. And I thought of possibly... now, I know, of course, no one's going to have the impact that Catelyn Stark would have, because she's the wife of the former Hand of the King and the mother of the current King in the North. But I thought maybe Galbart Glover, he's considered tactful and loyal. Now, of course, we don't necessarily agree with a lot of the decisions being made back at Deepwood Mott without his presence, but I think he might have been one option they could have considered. If his mother is his only reliable envoy, then he's in a bit of a tough situation here.
Yeah, I will say, actually, as you went through that list, I did think that the right one... I mean, okay, there's nothing wrong with sending Kat, apart from the fact she doesn't want to go, and you're making her miserable by sending her.
Right.
I think Edmure is a very interesting choice, because he's obviously as prestigious as Kat in many ways, because he's the heir to Riverrun.
Right. He's a few short breaths away from being
Lord of Riverrun, exactly. Yeah. So he's almost as prestigious as Kat, and it would get him out of Rob's hair and allow Rob to make better decisions around the Riverlands.
Sure. And Kat wants to stay in Riverrun with her dying father. Edmure's been in Riverrun for a while, so I see what you're saying. It might have made sense for Edmure to go on this journey. But
we needed it to be a POV character. We would have missed all this fun.
Yes, that's true.
If they'd sent Edmure.
Now, Rob, last Kat chapter, did ask Kat to go back to Winterfell to be with his little brothers, and she declined. If she had gone, was he going to just abandon the plan? Like, that, I got nobody. Oh, well.
Yeah, if I were Kat, I'd be like, when he says, hey, I want you to travel 1,000 miles south to talk to Renly Baratheon, I'd be like, you remember what you asked me yesterday? I'll go with that plan. If you don't mind.
Yeah, so she sent a letter north before she left Riverrun. She sent a letter north to her little boys, Bran and no, I don't forget Rickon. We don't forget Rickon on this show. And she lets them know, I haven't forgot you. It's just that Rob needs me more. And on some levels, that's true. It is good for him to have an advisor who really does just have his best interests at heart. Although, of course, she did push for her girls in return for Jaime Lannister, which might not have been in the best interest of Rob and his new kingdom. But overall, she really, there's no one that's going to have his interest at heart better than his own mom. So
yeah, true.
But as any parent of a teen knows, as long as mom and dad are there watching over them, the kids are going to be slow to progress to general independence and making their own decisions, whether those be good or bad. They gotta learn to fail on their own so they can learn how to turn those failures into successes. So, maybe it would be best for her to return to Winterfell and let him be King Rob, sans mom.
Yeah. Maybe Bran and Rickon are learning to make decisions by themselves.
Right.
Maybe that's what she's aiming for.
No, I was thinking about it. I was going to say that Ned and Robert didn't have any parental guidance when they started Robert's Rebellion, but they did have Jon Arryn, who was their foster father. So there was very that. True.
I just had a vision of Bran and Rickon in Winterfell, like some sort of hedonistic sort of like opium den. when the letter arrives from her mother, they realise that none of them have learned how to read and throw it away.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good image. I like it.
Yeah.
Fairly soon into this chapter, they get taken by Colin of Greenpools, and he takes them into custody and says, "I'll take you to King Renly," and she thinks, as escort or as captor. And when I read that, I thought, well, that's another issue with sending your mom, because he thinks both sisters, but we know only Sansa is currently held by an enemy, but he thinks they both are. If Renly decided, he could just take her captive, and if he sends a bannerman, it's not that big of a risk.
Right, but then again, that's also the first part of making the peace deal, is that you are making yourself vulnerable to that.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. I
You're
see that.
saying, hey, if you wanted to, you could immediately cause a war with me by capturing my mother and taking her captive. But I don't think you're going to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely a risk, because he's already got at least one sister in captive by one enemy. You know, there's only right now, 3 other kings, so just needs Stannis to take Rickon captive. And
Good luck, Stannis.
Yeah.
So Kat says before she left Riverrun, she at this point in the chapter, she thinks back to her leaving Riverrun, and she says a tearful farewell to her father, and she sort of turns the table on what he used to say to her when she was a child. Yeah. He would tell her to wait for him, and she begs her father to wait for her this time.
Right.
She wants to see him again before he dies.
Yeah.
He mistakes her, Kat, for her own mother, Minisa, and asks whether or not his girls, Kat and Lysa, are okay, and she basically plays along with him and says, yes, the kids are fine, you know, so as to reassure him and not break him out of it, not make him realize he's 30 years out of date with his news.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he's definitely fading fast compared to when, you know, Kat first got there and they had a semi-coherent conversation, and now, you know, he seems to be basically out of it. Of course, I think when she first got there, he was staying off the milk of the poppy so that he could be focused. He was dealing with the pain so that he could be mentally sharper when she saw him. Apparently, you know, he must be pretty heavily dosed up with the milk of the poppy at the moment.
Yeah.
But speaking of Tullys, we learned that Robb and Kat have reached out to Lysa again and again and again, it seems. I think Robb says, what, have we sent 4 birds to the Eyrie? So we also know that Tyrion sent Littlefinger to get Lysa and the Knights of the Vale on their side. So we've got a tug of war here between Lysa, between the Starks and Tullys and the Lannisters.
Yeah, honestly, I think both sides are wasting their ravens. Because the one thing she wants is security and to be out of it, so she's not going to join in on either side, I don't think. But good luck to them. Yeah,
when I read it, I thought, did Kat leave the Vale with any notion that Lysa could be swayed? And then I was thinking about, like, what might have changed, what might have happened that Kat would be like, well, okay, let's try it again. And I thought maybe, you know, news about their father's vulnerable state, being trapped between the 2 Lannisters' armies, and the fact that he's, you know, dying, might have moved Lysa to action. But
100,000 armed Lannisters pillaging your native lands,
right,
might stir the conscience a little bit.
You might think. Yeah, the situation has certainly gotten more dire since Kat left the Eyrie, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So Robb is showing a little diplomacy that Stannis doesn't appear to be careful of. He's reaching out to everyone, trying to make friends, which is good. I mean, and it makes perfect sense. It really does make perfect sense to make a deal with Renly. And
sure.
What if I were both sides of this, I would simply kick the can down the road for who's in charge when this is over.
Right. Yes. Win the war first, then flip a coin or something.
Yeah. Don't say, I'll do this if you will bend the knee. No. Say, yes, let's do this. And then say, when it's over, you say, look, I want my 7 kingdoms back. I want you to bend the knee. And see how that goes.
Right.
Maybe you can have a brand new war. But in the meantime, at least you're having a war with someone who's fairly decent and noble.
Right.
Versus the Lannisters.
Yes. This war, if 3 of the 4 kings would get on that page, this war would be over. Because there's really no reason that Stannis and Renly should be at odds at this moment. You know, I get it.
Actually, I would say I think it's easier for Renly and Robb to not be at odds at this moment. I think Stannis and Renly, I can sort of see how that's a hard hatchet to bury.
Well,
because...
yes, it should not have happened, I guess, is what I'm
right.
saying.
Okay, that's true.
If you're Renly, you support your older brother. He's only got a daughter. So,
And she's Patch Faces.
Yes, that's right.
I heard a gossip about it.
So, and he and Selyse don't seem likely to be having any more kids. They don't seem to enjoy each other's company a whole lot. But he clearly is not going to get this throne while his brother is alive. There's no point where Stannis is going to say, all right, you win. I'll just be Lord of Storm's End. So when he took the crown, or when he claimed the Iron Throne, he was basically saying, I'll take this to the death if need be. So, let your brother win the crown and then stab him in the back, I guess would be one way to do it. It'd be a lot easier than the path he's on right now. But really, like I said, I mean, he's the heir at the moment. If he lets his brother take the crown, he's the heir. So
yeah.
But I get it. Yes, it's definitely a harder hatchet to bury. There's really no reason for Renly and Robb to be at odds right now.
Right. Yes, because they definitely have a common enemy, and apart from the fact that they both claim a piece of this land, or rather, Robb claims a piece of the land that Renly claims.
Yeah,
they don't really have any beef with one another.
Yeah, and I really think most of it comes down to the Riverlands. I think if Robb was just trying to be King of the North, there might be a lot more room to negotiate.
Yeah, and actually, you could even make that. I mean, I could make that palatable to everyone. I think if Robb remains King of the North and just goes back to the North, and that's his domain, the Riverlands comes back into the Seven Kingdoms under King Renly.
Right.
I think they'd be okay with that, especially if King Renly helps rid them of the Lannisters who are pillaging their lands. They'd be delighted to claim him as king just as much as Robb. Why not?
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly why they're backing Robb right now.
Right. So as well as Renly, Robb's also reaching out to Lysa, as we mentioned, and also to Balon Greyjoy, who we did mention that earlier, but that was more about Theon we were talking. So he is, trying to find allies wherever he can, and again with all of these, they can all make common cause with Renly here. There's no reason, because they all have the common enemy of the Lannisters.
Right. Yeah.
But the one thing, and you posed this question, so I'll give you credit for this, is why not Dorne? I mean, we haven't heard of any reach out to Dorne here, and Dorne is one that can definitely sway things. It can certainly make life difficult for Renly. It can certainly make life very difficult for the Lannisters. And we know that in the short term they are anti-Lannister, so they'd be a good one to recruit. They'd be ready to do it.
Yes.
So it's interesting that we haven't heard of any overture to Dorne from Robb.
And his argument could be that both kingdoms could break free as independent kingdoms, and we know that Dorne has a history of seeking independence from the Iron Throne. They've done it multiple times, so it might be a good argument to make. Now, Robb doesn't have any interest in being the king of the Seven Kingdoms. He just wants to be king of the North and the Riverlands. So if the Martells think it's a better bet to back the current king and get the spot on the small council, then I guess they would turn him down, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to make the offer.
Yeah, but you are now building a very fragile alliance, because if you build an alliance between Robb, Renly, Stannis, and Prince Doran Martell, then all four of those people have got requirements from this battle, from this war,
right,
which are at odds with one another. They cannot all be satisfied.
Yeah.
When Robb tells Renly, we've got Dorne on our side, what did you promise them? Oh, never mind.
No.
Never mind.
We'll talk about it after the fact.
Yeah.
Of course, Renly thinks Dorne's going to soon come and support him. I don't know where he gets that from, because according to Tyrion, he's not even reached out to the Martells.
Right. But that intel could be wrong. I mean, I mean, he's a lot closer to the Martells than Tyrion is.
Right.
So it wouldn't be hard for them to have some communication that Tyrion isn't aware of.
Yeah. Robb does realize, he mentions to Cat that he does not have enough leverage to get the Lannisters to take that peace offer that we read in the last Tyrion chapter seriously. And he's right. Tyrion has no intentions of taking that seriously. So he's actually right in trying to further improve his position and hurt the Lannisters' position at the same time.
Thing is, though, I think just by saying that, you make me realise that it's wrong. Robb does have the leverage to get the Lannisters to take the peace deal seriously. He has two pieces of leverage. One is Jaime.
Right.
Jaime is a huge leverage against the Lannisters. But the second one is the fact that while the Lannisters are fighting against the North, they're going to lose the entire kingdom to Renly.
If Renly moves his butt and gets to King's Landing.
If Renly will keep moving, yeah. And so that's big leverage. If I were there's a very... I know we talked about it at length in the last Tyrion chapter, how Tyrion thinks if I can just keep stringing Robb along, I'll have time to deal with Renly. But in actual fact, it would be easier if you got rid of Robb. If you said to Robb, okay, you can have everything you want, just give us Jaime back and you can have the girls back and you can... I mean, obviously that's a slightly tricky situation. We'll accede to all your demands, but now that's it. No more fighting between us, and give us Jaime back.
Yeah,
then
sure. That would make sense. If they're thinking clearly, that makes sense. Of course, they're human, so emotions get involved and stuff. But
true. So Robb seems to want to march, but according to what Kat says of their last conversation, she says it's dangerous to march on Harrenhal. That's what Tywin wants, and he says I never mentioned Harrenhal. So Robb's going somewhere, but we're not sure where. Yeah, or at least he's planning to.
Theon told Balon that Robb is marching on Casterly Rock and Lannisport.
Right.
And
right.
It would make sense if he's not marching on Harrenhal that that's what he's doing.
Right. There's two Lannister armies to choose from. Right. That's where they are. Yeah.
Maybe he's going to go hide in the Vale also.
Right.
Yeah, if he's successful, if he could successfully take out that Lannisport army, then he removes the predicament of being stuck between two Lannister forces. He brings Tywin out of safe confinement, and if Tywin has to come after him and has to go west toward Lannisport, it also removes the easy access to defend King's Landing, which would give Renly an even easier time.
I wonder about that. I wonder how important Casterly Rock and Lannisport are to Tywin in the short term. I mean, he presumably has some family there,
right,
who would be vulnerable, but are they strategically? They don't seem like they're very important in the short term. That you could just say, "Oh well,
right,
we've lost them for now. Let me head south and deal with Renly, and then once I've won that, I'll come back and get my hometowns back."
Yeah, sure. Strategically, I agree. They're not as important. It's just the fact that your enemy is now tramping around in your homelands.
Yeah.
But the cherry on the top with that plan is that he mentions to Kat that his men are bored and thinking of what he calls hearth and harvest. And doing this gives them an action, gives them something to focus on, something to engage in, and removes that hearth and home thought that they have for a little while. So it's another little bonus.
So I don't know about you, but my first impression of Renly as king is somewhat disappointing. Hosting a tourney at a time like this seems incredibly ill-advised.
Yes, it does. On multiple levels. Right.
Yes, you're injuring people you're going to need to be fighting for you very soon.
Right.
And it just feels like it's the worst case of falling for the trappings of the office when you need to do things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. When Kat realizes what's happening, she thinks to herself, real enemies on every side, and half the realm in flames, and Renly sits here playing war like a boy with his first wooden sword, which is exactly, I mean, that's a really great analogy there, because he's like, oh, I'm king. What was it? I want to throw a tournament. I want to sit as a king at a tournament like I watched my brother do all those years. So, yeah.
But he heard Ned Stark try to refuse the hands tournament.
Right.
That's how you lead. That's how you rule. You turn these stupid, wasteful things down.
Yep.
And you get to business. And the thing is, while he was in King's Landing, he came across as being a little frivolous, but not unable to see the big picture.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
He's shown some strategic thought, and now he's just squandering it.
Yeah, I think he's just caught up. He's caught up in everything that goes along with 100,000 people pledging fealty to you. But when they discover that a melee is going on, Sir Wendell's all for it. He's very excited that there is that this tournament's going on, and Cat, of course, can't believe it. And it made me think about the two opposing sides of Renly's leadership going on here. On one hand, he's messing around with these tourneys that are no doubt not only slowing his progress towards King's Landing, but also injuring probably some of his best fighters that he has.
Right.
But it's also the very thing that these young, anxious to prove themselves lords and knights are lining up to pledge their fealty to. This is the hot ticket in town. This is where all the cool action is, where the young, hip knights and lords are gathering to earn their glory.
But imagine how cool that party could be if it was in King's Landing.
It'd be way cooler.
Exactly.
Right party, wrong destination.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is hard to read Renly. I mean, like every conversation he comes across, I mean, even in this chapter, when he talks to... So we mentioned several times in the summary, when Cat or any of her entourage talk to any of Renly's retainers, they have a diplomatic clashing of heads over titles. But Renly completely dispels with all that. He's like, it doesn't matter. He is much more thoughtful and solicitous about these kinds of things, and he cuts through it all. And as we've said many times, he strategically saw the need to get out of King's Landing the day his brother died, which nobody else seemed to see.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, he's basically the anti-Stannis. He's charismatic and handsome and easygoing, and mentions that he talks to both highborn and small folk alike with ease. And but the problem is, he's also anti-Stannis in battle experience and true leadership through hard times. So
he was eating juicy rat while Stannis was on the shoe leather.
Right.
He hasn't known hard times.
Yeah, like Crescent said back in the prologue, Renly is good at playing king, and but would he be good at being king is a different story. Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting here is something that, and partly this is from watching the TV show. You don't really think of this, but Renly looks just like King Robert.
Yeah, not so much in the TV show.
Not so much in the TV show. And actually, that was true, because in the TV show, by the time we saw Robert, he'd grown fat, and whereas Renly looked like what he was supposed to have looked like in his pomp.
Yeah.
Right. But Cat, of course, remembers Robert in his pomp and sees Renly in his crown and is just like, it's Robert come again. I mean,
yeah, a ghost in a golden crown, she says.
Yeah.
And that certainly can't hurt, his popularity as an Iron Throne claimant, especially here in the South where Robert's from.
Well, not necessarily true, because Robert was a disaster.
Well, yes. But he did win the crown. So
he did win the crown, yeah. Yeah, and he definitely seems to have sort of like matched Robert's gregarious nature and looks, but does he have the ability to curb it? I mean, this throwing a tournament halfway along the road for no reason seems to me to be a very Robert Baratheon thing.
Post-crown winning, yes.
Post-crown winning, exactly. Robert was like Stannis before he won the crown.
Right, he was
laser focused.
Yep, yeah. But, and then we throw the third brother in the mix here, and Stannis is just lame, boring, uncomfortable to talk to. He's unbending. He's basically no fun. These young knights and these young lords don't want to back that kind of king. They want to back the fun, chivalry-driven, honor, let's go make our glory. These are untested. These are knights of summer. They want to go out and make a name for themselves and get themselves into a song. They're not going to back Stannis.
What's your opinion on this then? Just that, knowing that much about the two brothers, which one do you think makes a better king?
Oh, they both have such flaws such extreme flaws. I think when the realm is calm, Renly might make the better king. Because when the realm is calm and everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, as long as Renly doesn't drink himself into a stupor and spend the crown into debt, I think he has a way of getting people to rally to him. I think that would be helpful. I think Stannis would make an okay king when the realm is calm, because he wouldn't have to be unbending and unyielding as much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the one thing is, of course, Stannis is thoughtful, and as a thoughtful person, he might appoint very good deputies and ministers to do the things, to do the governing of the realm, better perhaps than Renly.
Okay.
Although Renly might be a little bit lazy, and so he also might appoint very good ministers and deputies to do the... So maybe that doesn't matter too much, and then maybe it really does come down to the personality of the person in charge. And I can certainly imagine Stannis being the kind of person to keep looking for wars, even when this war was won. Possibly. He'll fight it until the day he dies. He'll spend the next... let's see, Stannis wins the throne here. He'll spend his entire monarchy rooting out people who fought against him.
Oh, because that's the kind of person he is. He's not just going to forgive.
It'd basically be like the sort of like Stalin.
Yeah. An enemy once is an enemy for life.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So we get a whole lot of description of the melee. It goes on for a few pages, actually. And at the end, it's Sir Loras Tyrell versus who we don't know at the time, learns to be Brienne of Tarth, or as Roy Dotrice would say, Brienne of Tarth. And she's quite the badass. We learned that there was 116. Yeah.
Interjection on the audiobook. That is why we're calling him Peter Baelish. Okay?
Not Petire. But Brienne is quite the badass. It was mentioned that there was 116 contestants at the start of this melee, and she was the last person standing. So she's got to be. But the crowd was against her the whole time, which, in the Reach, Loras is like a god. So I guess you could kind of see that coming, regardless of who it was.
Yes, I mean, they probably weren't booing her when there were 116, but when it was her against Loras Tyrell, they wanted Loras Tyrell to win. So. Right. But they call her Beauty, which is mocking because she is not, apparently. She's very, very tall and powerful and has what would traditionally be considered an unattractive face.
Yeah, according to Kat's description, as Kat says, she says that there's, well, she doesn't say it out loud, thankfully, but she thinks in her head, is there anything more unfortunate than an ugly woman? And of course, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So
yes.
But Kat also implies that she thinks Brienne is in love with Renly. She says the look that she gave him, she being Brienne and he being Renly, was painful to see, and it just gave the impression that she thinks that was a look of longing and loving there.
Well, she has just asked if I can attend you in your bedchamber for the rest of your life. So
it's true.
Hopefully, she likes him a little bit, at least.
Good point.
We one of the lords that is attending Renly Baratheon is Randall Tarley, Sam Tarley's father, and turns out Sam was right. He is a miserable so and so.
Yeah, he's not a pleasant guy in this chapter anyway. So one thing, you've got Kat and Brienne in this chapter, and they're both two strong, powerful capable women, but they're about as complete opposites as you could possibly get here. Now, we're two guys talking about attributes of women, so I hope it doesn't come across sexist in any way. We're just mentioning, discussing it as we see it here and as it's described to us.
Right. They don't exist to get offended.
Right.
And
yes.
hopefully we are just talking about fictional characters. So
yes.
If we do stray into stereotypes, it's because that's how they were portrayed to us.
Right. Yeah, so we've got Cat, and now we've known Cat for a while now. She was in the second chapter of A Game of Thrones, and she mostly embraces the role as a female in this feudal society and confidant to her son Robb and Ned. We've seen her steer how to get the things she wants through suggestions and pointing out facts, such as when she got Ned to agree to go. She wanted it to be his idea, basically, so she just kind of kept steering him until he realized, oh, I do have to go south with King Robert, which he didn't want to do, and she did want him to do. But we've also seen her use her status as a woman to benefit when necessary, such as here she tells Renly she doesn't know about Robb's war plans because she doesn't want to divulge that information, and she says it's because she doesn't sit on his war council, which she does know exactly, has a pretty good idea anyway of what Robb is considering. But of course, because she's a woman, Renly easily believes that she isn't privy to this information.
Yeah, but all of this, I mean, you're absolutely right. She does do this. She plays on her femininity to her advantage, which is a good thing. But it does cap her power at a ceiling, because, like, for instance, she would trade Jaime for her daughters, but she's never going to have the influence to do that. It's kept from her because she doesn't truly have the power.
Yeah,
and so that's both the pro and con of what she's doing. By playing the role that's chosen for her, she gets much of what she wants and is able to influence things that she might otherwise not be able to influence, but she can only go so far.
Yeah, I get that.
And Brienne, by contrast, of course, is physically strong, powerful, and very capable, but she is way outside the expectations of the society.
Yeah.
And so
she's more like an Arya than a Sansa.
For sure. Yeah. For sure.
Both are strong in their own ways. Just one is more the traditional female role in a feudal society, and the other is not.
Yeah. In actual fact, I mean, Brienne and Cat are kind of like older versions of Arya and Sansa in some ways.
Oh, yeah. Good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, if Brienne was a man, she'd be as famous as Loras Tyrell. But because she's not, she's being mocked and disliked, even though she was the best fighter out of 116 contestants here. Yeah.
She obviously completely buys into what everything Renly is selling, chivalry and honor aspects. And of course, given that he's just elevated her, a woman, to the Kingsguard, that makes her feel included in a way that most of the rest of society would not make her feel included.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
hence the devotion.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's much more woke than a lot of the other leaders in this in Westeros here.
Plus, she just won against 115 others. I want that one as the Kingsguard.
Right, yeah.
I don't care what it is.
Yeah, although she cannot see... So Kat mentions that winter is coming, and she actually feels pity. There's a lot of whole bragging going on, a lot of boasting and talk of glory, and Kat pities these guys because she says they're knights of summer and winter is coming. And Brienne says, nope, winter's not coming for us because, even if we die, we'll be, ensconced in story where we'll be glorified. And she can't see that winter can come in other ways than just dying. That she's a fighter, she's a warrior. It's die or survive. And Kat, of course, bracing her starkness, brings up winter is coming. So,
I also think that Brienne, at least at this point, and maybe her character will develop, she is the quintessential young knight. I mean, she just wants glory. She does not think about any of the things that Cat thinks about here. She just thinks about the glory of battle and fighting for the honor of your king. And,
right.
That's
absolutely.
Were she not female, it would be barely worth mentioning her as a character here, because she is so one-dimensional in that respect.
So far. Yeah. And, Kat thinks that the whole group, she's at this feast, and she thinks the whole group is drunk on, as she says, song and story, and that they think they're invincible. And it reminded me of kids playing Call of Duty and thinking that, that there's, they want to become soldiers so that they can fight in war and win all this glory, when in reality that's not what war is. They think that playing in these tourneys and these melees and jousting is what war is, and really that's not. It's much more terrible.
So while we're being woke, is there a gay vibe here around Renly? I mean, the king's, he's got his Kingsguard wearing rainbow cloaks. Now, obviously, the rainbow flag doesn't mean anything in Westeros, but it does to us.
Right.
And Cat notices considerable greater animation when Renly is talking to Loras than when he's talking to Loras' sister, Marjorie, Renly's new wife. And so, now that might just be because Marjorie's quiet and introverted and not very interesting, and he and Loras have got they've been friends for a while. Maybe that's all it is, but reading it again, I'm sensing it a little bit, but
we might be. I think when I read the books through the first time, because I had watched the show first, I was looking at it from that view, because in the show they clearly make them in a gay relationship, Renly and Loras, that is. So I looked at it from that spectrum as well, but. In this, so far, we haven't seen a whole lot of interaction between them. Renly wouldn't be the first 20-something to have his girlfriend or significant other at a party, but spend more time with his buddy.
Right.
Like you said, Marjorie could maybe be shy and quiet, and he and Renly go way back. They left King's Landing together back into Game of Thrones, but...
So you're not convinced? You think it's ambiguous here, whether or not?
Yes, I think at the moment anyway. So it seems fairly ambiguous.
Okay.
Now,
well, let's go with that then.
Speaking, like you said, that the rainbow flag means nothing in Westeros, but the rainbow is often present when seps and stuff are involved. We a lot of times heard about the rainbow light from the crystals at the seps.
Right.
And there's also the rainbow pool at the Great Sept of Baelor in King's Landing. So.
So is the rainbow cloak then an attempt to curry favor with the church to bolster his claim?
Could
perhaps?
Be, yeah.
Because obviously the church could be a good ally here if you can convince the church that Joffrey is the child of incest.
Yes.
They would frown on him being the new king.
That's a very solid point. That very well may be the case. Or he just likes the standard Kingsguard wears all white, and he's like, we're going to be more fun. We're going to wear 7 different colors.
Crescent called it. He knew.
Yes, that's right. Now, real quick about Marjorie. If you remember back in the Game of Thrones, Renly had designs on her for Robert as a replacement for Cersei, and he showed Ned that picture in the locket because he had heard that Marjorie looked a lot like Ned's sister Lyanna. So... well, Robert's gone, so he married her himself.
Right.
Barristan Selmy's gone missing.
Yes, he did. We thought he might show up here, didn't we? Because that was one of the places he would go to. But no, he's not here, and Renly doesn't know where he is.
Yeah, Renly oddly asks if he's in Riverrun.
Which makes sense. If he didn't come here, where else has he gone?
Well, that's the thing, is he says... because Cat says, nope, I haven't seen him in Riverrun. And he says, that he had heard Barristan saying he was going to back the true king. And wouldn't you think that if, it would be Stannis in line before Robb Stark as the true king?
Well, okay. If Stannis and Cat were in the room with him, he would ask Stannis first.
Okay, yes.
But Stannis isn't there. So he's checking... it seems like a long shot, but he's not with you, is he?
Right. Yeah. He said, when he didn't show up here. He'd been holding the cloak that he gave Brienne. He had been holding for Barristan Selmy. I guess he finally gave up. He said when he didn't come here, I thought maybe he had gone to Riverrun. And I thought, wouldn't your first thought be, oh, he might have gone to my brother, who is the actual true heir to the Iron Throne? And, all three of them, Renly, Barristan Selmy, and Stannis, all served on Robert's small council together. So,
so they knew each other. Yeah. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the key. He knew that Barristan Selmy thought Stannis would be a terrible king.
That could be.
From their time together.
I'd rather go back to 15-year-old kid from the north than that guy.
Who's got no claim on the throne. But I'm going to call him the true king and make it so.
Yeah.
So Renly takes Catelyn to the top of the tower, and the cook fires stretch for miles and miles. This host is amazingly large and spells serious trouble for King's Landing.
Yes.
I mean, if nothing else at King's Landing, this kind of force could easily starve them out. And they're already starving. It wouldn't take an awful lot.
Put a blockade up around the city, and we know how ripe the people inside the city are for a change here. Yes, that could be disastrous for King's Landing. But speaking of how large his host is around this castle here, there was no mention of House Hightower, and they're one of the most prominent houses in the Reach. Now there are a few of their bannermen are mentioned, but you'd think if Hightower, who does owe their fealty to Highgarden, who is here in plenty, the
sharing Renly's bed,
maybe
somebody is.
But you would think, if they were providing their full backing of Renly, they would have send their own men, not just have some of their bannermen.
Yeah, that's interesting because it does seem like the host is so big, you just assume everybody's there. But there are some chinks in the armor. The Hightower's missing. The Red Wines are not there because the Red Wines' two heirs are captives at King's Landing.
Yes,
Horus and Hobber. Horror and slobber.
Yeah, so Sansa would say. And I was thinking maybe that's what, because he's telling Cat about how, this isn't even my full army. I've got 10,000 back in Highgarden, and Dorne will be joining me soon. And don't forget my brother Stannis has, the fleet at Dragonstone. And I thought, why? Who are you trying to fool? It's very obvious that your brother is not part of your force here. And I thought maybe that's why he mentioned Stannis, just to give off the idea that he had a navy as well as a land force, trying to impress her even more. Yeah. It didn't work.
No, definitely not. So Renly basically offers Robb the titles, lands, honours, including the title King of the North, because it's all superficial. Because what he wants is Robb to bend the knee, and therefore Renly would be the king of Westeros, of the Seven Kingdoms, just as Joffrey has been and Robert before him. So, it could happen. I mean, maybe that's enough for Robb. Maybe to be the king of the North, but only in name.
Yeah,
right. I mean, again, Robb's only at war because the Lannisters murdered his father here.
Yes, he's got to really decide. That was the original reason for starting this war. Is that okay to end the war?
Decimating the Lannisters is enough, Yes. It should be.
Right.
Yeah. Going into a second war with your allies doesn't seem like a great idea.
Yeah.
So the chapter ends with the news that Stannis has besieged Storm's End. So Stannis has left Dragonstone, it would appear.
Yes, right.
But it's an odd choice because you assumed that when his navy did leave Dragonstone, they'd be heading for King's Landing, but instead he's headed to Storm's End, which is not a million miles away, but it's not the right direction. No. But I guess it also strategically it might be a good move, because if you attack King's Landing purely from the sea, you might be vulnerable to, for instance, 7,000 pots of wildfire.
Yep.
But if you land at Storm's End and build an army, then you can attack by land and sea, and then you become a lot more of a dangerous force.
Yeah,
but it does bring to a head the conflict between Renly and Stannis. that didn't have to come to a head. If Renly attacked by land and Stannis by sea, they could have the fight with the Lannisters first and then decide to have their secondary fight.
Exactly.
But landing at Storm's End and besieging Storm's End brings that one to the forefront now. You've switched the order of these conflicts.
Yeah, you wonder if it's
to the benefit of only one person. And
exactly. Does nobody... There's like a perfectly ripe apple sitting directly in front of all of them in the shape of King's Landing, and nobody wants to reach out and just grab it.
Okay, so to background. What you got for us?
Background. So this chapter takes place in an area known as Bitterbridge, where the Roseroad crosses the Mander River. Now, both bridge and the castle are called Bitterbridge, but they were once called Stonebridge. The name change occurred because of a battle between the Faith Militant and King Maegor the Misunderstood Targaryen during the Faith Militant Uprising. The battle at Stonebridge was one of the first major battles between the Faith Militant and the Targaryen king. The Faith Militant host was led by a man named Wat the Hewer. He and his force of 9,000 tried to cross the Mander over the Stone Bridge. However, they were caught between 6 different royalist hosts. The Faith Militant host was primarily untrained and undisciplined small folk known as poor fellows, wearing not much but boiled leather, rough spun, and scraps of rusted steel, and their weapons left much to be desired, consisting mostly of just woodsmen axes, sharpened sticks, and farm implements, so the chances were not good against the knights of the Targaryen armies. And with the poor fellow forces divided by the river, they were annihilated. It's said that the carnage caused the Mander to run red with blood for 20 leagues, and from then on, the bridge and castle overlooking it became known as Bitterbridge. Now, Wat managed to kill half a dozen lords, including Lord Meadows, who was the commander of the king's army. But he was eventually taken alive and delivered to King's Landing in chains, and as you might have guessed, Maegor did not treat poor Wat with much kindness. He had Wat's limbs cut off with his own axe, but it didn't end there. Maegor had his maesters keep Wat alive to watch Maegor commit yet another marriage that violates the beliefs of the Faith of the Seven, his marriage to his third wife, Tyanna of the Tower.
I do feel that we should perhaps occasionally not call Maegor the Misunderstood, in case people have lost the fact that he is Maegor the Cruel, sort of by canon. Only on our podcast is he known as Maegor the Misunderstood. Yeah. So also, House Tarth. Brienne is from House Tarth. It's a noble house of the Stormlands. They rule the island of Tarth from their seat, Evenfall Hall. The island sits in the northeast part of Shipbreaker Bay, controlling the Straits of Tarth between the island and mainland Westeros to the north. The Lords of Tarth call themselves the Even Star. Their sigil, which gets a quick description by Catelyn, is quartered yellow suns on rose and white crescent moons on blue. Their words are not known. Comparison with the television show, this is all pretty well captured, actually. Kat's party is smaller. We do see Brienne of Tarth winning her battle. She doesn't damage Loris's pretty face, so that's for the good. She does want to be a member of Renly's Kingsguard, and pretty much it's all pretty carefully captured, even down to Renly showing off his army to Kat, so she knows.
Okay.
So this is all very much in line.
Well, it was a good chapter, so I'm glad they kept it in the show.
Yeah. Pedantry?
Well, I just had one little thing that struck me as odd. So when Renly is telling Kat, you can have my pavilion, I'm taking Lord Caswell's castle while I'm here, so I don't need it. And he says, this is a farewell feast. I'm sure Lord Caswell is happy to see my hungry host leave. And Caswell says, not true, my lord, my grace. What's yours is mine. And Renly says, well, you're lucky I'm not my brother Robert, because he took those kind of things literally when he visited. And he said, do you have daughters? Lord Caswell said, I have 2 daughters. Then Renly says, well, then you're definitely lucky I'm not my brother. But, that implies that he would have probably deflowered one of his daughters.
I get the implication.
Yes, okay, just making sure. But Kat describes Lord Caswell as a wispy young man. So how old could his daughters possibly be? I'm picturing them as children. So
I think that would make sense what you're saying. Of course, Renly didn't ask how old they were, so Renly's actually just spreading vile rumors about his older brother to sort of build up his
terrible rumor to spread there.
Yeah, I take your point. News and notes. Do you have a review for us?
We do a review. I knew this was going to be a long chapter, so I picked a fairly short review, but still, it's very positive review, and we very much appreciate it. It's from Shrubachop. Is that how you pronounce that? Shrubachop on Apple Podcasts, and it's titled "Best A Song of Ice and Fire Podcast Out There." So just right there alone is
right.
all that needs to be said. And exactly the review says, title says it all. These guys are funny and go in depth without spoiling. Perfect to follow along for a reread or go back and listen to your favorite chapters just for fun.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, thanks.
Yes.
All right, time is up. Let's draw some conclusions. So, as we've said, having a tournament is just a rotten idea. It's a waste of time, a waste of good manpower. Get on the road, Renly.
Yes.
And I would also like to point out that for the second tournament in a row, Loras Tyrell's finished second.
Right. Second to the Hound. Well, technically he deferred to he because the Hound saved him from Sir Gregor, he gave him the Hands Tourney title.
So he was second. Well, okay, that's true actually. Did he win the tournament?
No, he didn't. He gave it to the Hound for saving him.
But hang on. Did he not
yes,
Gregor
he beat Gregor, yes.
But the fight wasn't over. So when is the fight over in a tournament? When you unseat the guy or when they have it out?
I think it's when you unseat the guy.
Oh, so okay. So maybe
joust.
I've been unfair. Maybe Sir Loras is not a perennial second place loser.
Well, he didn't beat the Hound. So, he finished second.
True, but he wasn't fighting the Hound.
Right. Now, he did win the tourney on Joff's other name day, where the Valyrian steel dagger was said to have changed hands between Tyrion and Littlefinger Peter Baelish. But, of course, that dagger seems to not have actually changed hands. Anyway.
Okay.
Yes, I get what you're saying. I thought the same thing. You finished poor Renly, runner-up. I mean, poor Loras, runner-up again. It's a trend here. But we see Renly wraps himself in extreme opulence. I mean, we get a description of the pavilion alone that he's staying in from Cat, and it's just over the top. And, every trapping of a king. But, so, he looks the part, but can he actually lead like a king needs to lead? Well, that we don't know.
So Bitterbridge is about halfway between Highgarden and King's Landing, and now news of trouble has arrived from Storm's End, so further delay of the siege of King's Landing seems inevitable.
It does, yes. That's one of the downsides of Stannis' plan. Yes. Yeah. And it appears that no effects of the war have yet reached the reach, if you will.
Right.
But
I mean, the reach feeds itself, so it's not importing food from the Riverlands, and so
right. Yeah, this feast was even more indulgent than the one we just had in Winterfell last chapter.
I always think more indulgent than Winterfell is damning with faint praise.
As Lady Oakheart would say in this chapter, it's drier than the sea. Saying that something's drier than the sea.
Yes. So Renly's drawing people to him by, playing on their chivalry and goodness, triumphing over the evil Lannisters. Unfortunately, as Cat is acutely aware, that's not how war actually pans out.
No, it's not. But where is Selmy?
Yes.
Where's Barristan Selmy?
The mystery we didn't even know was a mystery has deepened.
Right.
All right. So, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and, preferably, a fantastic review, we certainly would very much appreciate that, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to really grow our platform or our show there, and we'd very much appreciate if you'd help us out by at least just swiping across to 5 stars. And hey, if you leave us a review on any platform, certainly might hear it in a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.